Hello to all my beautiful students one more time. I'm happy to be back with video lesson number 2. So hopefully you all had a chance to watch the first video or get to kind of recap, refresh your minds on the book Out of the Dust and what we've read so far. You've gotten a chance to, if not write an argumentative essay, then at least read through an example of an argumentative essay and really get good at understanding where the claim, where the reasons, evidence, explanation are all at. So we're going to continue, as I said, with a new chapter today. Our lesson today is reading part of Spring 1935. So as you know, we've been moving on along through the seasons. Winter just ended, spring has now entered. And I will read 7 poems from this chapter, and every 2 or 3 poems I will stop and have you fill in a chart. The first time around, I'll walk you through exactly what that chart looks like and how to fill it out, and then you'll be able to do that as we go along. We'll start with a poem called Heart Sick on page 153. A lot of you all would have gotten there super quickly. Heart Sick. The hard part is, in spite of everything, if I had any boy court me, it'd be Mad Dog Craddock. But Mad Dog can have any girl. Why would he want me? I'm so restless. My father asks what's going on with me. I storm up to my room, and leave him alone, standing in the kitchen. If Ma were here, she would come up and listen. And then later, she would curl beside my father and assure him that everything was all right, and soothe him into his farmer's sleep. My father and I, we can't soothe each other. I'm too young, he's too old, and we don't know how to talk anymore. If we ever did. April 1935. Skin. I'll read this one and then walk you through what the chart looks like. My father has a raised spot on the side of his nose that never was there before and won't go away. And there's another on his cheek and 2 more on his neck. And I wonder, why the heck is he fooling around? He knows what it is. His father had those spots too. April 1935. All right. Let's walk through the chart. And I'll walk you through what filling out the chart will look like. So this is for the last chapter we read, Winter 1935. Here's an example of how that chart would have been filled out with information from the last chapter. If I ask for description, their physical and emotional states, then Winter 1935 gave us information about Daddy's physical emotional state. I'm going to include that information in this box, right next to where it says description and underneath Daddy. It says Daddy doesn't do much except work, and he has taken some odd jobs around town. He has begun digging the pond Ma wanted. He doesn't talk much to anyone. So that's written in my own words, right? That does not come straight from the book. Never in the book does it say he has begun digging the pond Ma wanted. He doesn't talk much to anyone. That is me summarizing or paraphrasing things about Dad's physical state and emotional state. So no quotes. This is a description that we could have written for Billie Jo with the information from that Winter 1935 chapter. It says, Billie Jo misses Ma terribly, right? Describing how she feels emotionally missing. Right? She also feels responsible for causing her mother's death and her and her father's unhappiness. Despite the pain in her hands, right? That's talking about her physical state, physical referring to how your body feels. Her hands are in pain. She begins to practice piano again and begins performing again. Her hands are scarred and she feels they don't work right. Things about her feeling how she looks, right? Now, this next one asks for evidence or quotations that reveal their thoughts and points of view regarding various events. How might Daddy feel with Ma's death? How might Billie Jo feel with Ma's death, right? Those are things, quotes from the text we're going to put in these boxes, quotes from the text that reveal the thoughts and the point of view of whatever character we're talking about regarding various events, right? How does a character feel about a certain event, a particular event that happened? Let's look at Daddy. From the winter 1935, we could have pulled this quote. He sings sometimes under his breath, even now, even after so much sorrow. He sings a man's song, deep with what has happened to us. Now I included quotes because it comes straight from the text, and a page number, page 111. There I'm getting information about how he feels about some type of event. After all that sorrow, right? That can be referring to an event in which there was sadness, right? So much sorrow. How does he feel? Well, he sings. That tells me about how he's feeling. He sings a man's song deep with what has happened to us. He sings deeply, right? I get information about how he feels about a certain event. He's definitely been affected by it if he's singing deeply about it. Now it also says, we don't talk much. My father never was a talker. Ma's dying hasn't changed that. I guess he gets the sound out of him with the songs he sings. Page 112. I'm getting information about how Dad feels about the event of Ma's death. How does he feel? Well, he's still not talking. That's his point of view. That is something about him and his thoughts about a certain event. Hasn't changed for him, the fact that he doesn't talk much. Now, some things about Billie Jo. I did play like a cripple at Arlie's show. Not that Arlie would ever say it, but my hands are no good anymore. And my playing's no good. Arlie understands, I think. I think he won't ask again. Page 136. Right? That quote really tells me how Billie Jo is feeling after the event, after playing at Arlie's show. She feels not very confident, not very good. She feels that Arlie must now really get that her hands are causing her not to play very good. So we have a couple more categories. The last 3 categories that we're going to be asked to fill out on our chart are responses to and interactions with other characters. How does Daddy, how does Billie Jo respond to whenever they're interacting with another character? So here's an example from that winter 1935 chapter. Daddy and Billie Jo don't talk much. Daddy stares at Billie Jo sometimes, and Billie Jo thinks he's trying to find Ma in her. Right? Telling me about how Daddy, is acting, interacting, how he's acting when he's with somebody else, when he's with Billie Jo. Well, when he's with Billie Jo, he doesn't talk. Sometimes he tries to find Ma in her. Here's another one. He's making some kind of effort to get on better with me now, since I did him proud at the palace, page 134. Right? You can include quotes even if it doesn't ask for quotes. Here, this quote is telling me that Daddy is now talking or trying to get on better with Billie Jo, right? That's an example of an interaction. Things where a character is acting with another character. Now here, Billie Jo feels sorry for Daddy because she knows he misses Ma terribly too. It makes her feel good to help the family that has come to live in the schoolhouse. The information about how she acts towards other people, towards Daddy, she feels sorry for him. That's what she acts. She acts that way towards him, right? Then with the family that comes and lives in the schoolhouse, she is very helpful, right? It makes her feel good to help them. That's how she's acting towards others. Consequences of their actions. Daddy must be suffering from the guilt he feels as a result of his role in the death of his wife. right? Now this is information that we get from the chapter, because Daddy is also probably, even though he's trying to move on, and we understood that from the last chapter, he still probably feels guilty, right? Built with the whole pond, digging the pond and stuff. That's kind of telling me that this is a consequence of his action, guilt. Billie Jo feels guilty about her role in Ma's death too. She feels sorry for herself and her father. That chapter really taught me that Billie Jo's still kind of feeling guilty. And that she feels sorry for herself and her father. Many poems in that chapter talked about how her father and her don't get along all the time, or don't talk very much, and also really talked about the ways in which they're kind of separating, living their own lives. Then there's also possible lessons. This is the last category. Possible lessons learned from these actions. Daddy might have learned to listen to other people. He is now building the pond Ma wanted, and he's doing work other than tending his wheat crop. He starts to go to night school to learn new skills. That right here is a lesson he could have learned, and what I think he could have learned by reading that Winter 1935 chapter now, because I get information in that chapter that he built a pond and that he wants to go to night school. I'm getting the idea that a possible lesson that he may have learned is that now he should listen to other people. From that chapter, what I got about Billie Jo was that a possible lesson for her could have been Billie Jo knows that she can't change the past. She's starting to realize that she might survive her mother's death after all. Right? There's that poem where she talks about she doesn't really want to die. She wants a way out of the dust storm and her life, but she understands that she can survive her mother's death after all. Okay, so now here's the one you will be filling out. So if you could not print it out, make sure you copy it down. Pause the video, copy this chart down. There are 2 pages to this chart. Here's the other one. And so what you're going to do is fill out things about Daddy and Billie Jo that you learn from the reading. So now that you've read that we've read through those 2 poems, take a moment to fill out things that you may have learned from the way Daddy feels, the way he looks, his physical state, and Billie Jo as well. Maybe a quote that you remember that reveals their thoughts and point of view regarding various events, regarding an event that happened. If there's nothing for that, then you can skip it this time around, but make sure to add something by the time we are done reading the part that we're going to read of our Spring 1935 chapter. So the page numbers, if you remember something from the reading just now, are 153 and page 154. We've read 2 poems so far, page 153 and 154. There's these other 3 categories. How does Daddy respond to or interact with another character? How does Billie Jo do the same? Consequences of their actions. Is there's anything that we read in these 2 poems that tell us about maybe a consequence of their actions, or lesson that they may have learned from their actions? Then you fill those out. Okay, take a moment to do that. You can pause the video, and we'll keep reading after that. Okay, let's keep on reading. I'll read 3 poems this time, and then have you pause the video and add to your chart. Here they go. Regrets. Page 155. Regrets. I never go by Arlie's anymore. Still, every week he comes to school to teach, and sometimes I bump into Vera or Miller Rise or Mad Dog. They are always kind. They ask after my father. They ask how my hands are feeling. I cross my arms in front of me, tight, so my scars won't show. These days, Mad Dog looks at me, halfway between picking a fight and kindness. He walks with me away some afternoons, never says a word. He's quiet once the other girls go off. I've had enough of quiet men. I ought to keep clear of Mad Dog, but I don't. April 1935. Next one up. Fire on the rails. More fire. I hate fire. Hate it. But the entire Oklahoma panhandle is so dry. Everything is going up in flames. Everything too ready to ignite. Last week, the school caught fire. Damage was light on account of it being caught early. Most kids joked about it the next day, but it terrified me. I could hardly go back in the building, and this week, 3 boxcars in the train yard burned to ash. Jim Goyen and Harry Kessler spotted the fire, and that was a miracle considering the fierceness of the dust storm at the time. The fire boys tore over, but they couldn't put the blaze out without water, and water is exactly what they didn't have. So they separated the burning cars and moved them down a siding away from any little thing that might catch if the flames hopped. It was all they talked about at school. The dust blew, they say, so you'd think it would have smothered the fire out. But the flames, crazy in the wind, licked away at the wooden frames of the 3 boxcars until nothing remained but warped metal and twisted rails, scorched dirt, and charred ties. No one talks about fire right to my face. They can't forget how fire changed my life. But I hear them talking anyway. April 1935. One more and we'll pause. The mail train. They promised through rain, heat, snow, and gloom, but they never said anything about dust. And so the mail got stuck for hours, for days on the Santa Fe because mountains of dust had blown over the tracks, because blizzards of dust blocked the way. And all that time, as the dust beat down on the cars, a letter was waiting inside a mailbag. A letter from Aunt Ellis, my father's sister, written just to me, inviting me to live with her in Lubbock. I want to get out of here, but not to Aunt Ellis, and not to Lubbock, Texas. My father didn't say much when I asked what I should do. Let's wait and see, he said. What's that supposed to mean? April 1935. Okay, go ahead and add to your chart based on what information you gathered about Daddy and Billie Jo after reading these couple poems. Okay, so we're going to continue with our unit. Hopefully you had a chance to add to your chart based on those couple poems that we've gotten through so far. And I want to note that, for example, that box that asked for evidence or quotations about the thoughts or feelings of a character, their point of view towards an event, there were definitely a lot that you could have pulled from the poems we read. There were, I can think of at least 4 events that we got an idea of the way Billie Jo, for example, feels about them. There was the boxcars on fire, the school on fire, people talking about the fire, that in itself is an event, right? How does Billie Jo feel about that? How does she feel about the letter, or her dad really not giving her an answer about it, or a good answer about what she should do? Those were all things that you could pull and add to your chart. We're going to continue with 2 more poems, and then again you'll pause and you'll add to your chart. Here we go. Migrants. Migrants. We'll be back when the rain comes, they say, pulling away with all they own, straining the springs of their motor cars. Don't forget us. And so they go, fleeing the blowing dust, fleeing the fields of brown-tipped wheat, barely ankle-high and sparse as the hair on a dog's belly. We'll be back, they say, pulling away towards Texas, Arkansas, where they can rent a farm, pull in enough cash, maybe start again. We'll be back when it rains, they say, setting out with their bed springs and mattresses, their cook stoves and dishes, their kitchen tables and their milk goats tied to their running boards, in rickety cages setting out for California, where even though they say they'll come back, they just might stay. If what they hear about that place is true. Don't forget us, they say, but there are so many leaving. How can I remember them all? April 1935. We'll end with blankets of black. On the first clear day, we staggered out of our caves of dust into the sunlight, turning our faces to the big blue sky. On the second clear day, we believed the worst was over at last. We flocked outside, traded in town, going to stores and coming out, only to find the air still clear and gentle, grateful for each easy breath. On the third clear day, summer came in April, and the churches opened their arms to all comers, and all comers came. After church, folks headed for picnics, car trips. No one could stay inside. Reminds us of something, doesn't it? My father and I argued about the funeral of Grandma Lucas, who truly was no relation, but we ended up going anyway, driving down the road in a procession to Texoma. 6 miles out of town, the air turned cold. Birds beat their wings everywhere you looked, whole flocks dropping out of the sky, crowding on fence posts. I was sulking in the truck beside my father when heaven's shadow crept across the plains, a black cloud, big and silent as Montana, boiling on the horizon and barreling toward us. More birds tumbled from the sky, frantically keeping ahead of the dust. We watched as the storm swallowed the light. The sky turned from blue to black. Night descended in an instant, and the dust was on us. The wind screamed. The blowing dirt ran so thick I couldn't see the brim of my hat, and we plunged from the truck, fleeing. The dust swarmed like it had never swarmed before. My father groped my hand, pulled me away from the truck. We ran, a blind pitching toward the shelter of a small house, almost invisible, our hands tight together, running toward the ghostly door, pounding on it with desperation. A woman opened her home to us, all of us, not just me and my father, but the entire funeral procession, and one after another we tumbled inside, gasping, our lungs burning for want of air. All the lamps were lit against the dark. The house, dazed by dust, gazed weakly out. The walls shook in the howling wind. We helped tack up sheets on the windows and doors to keep the dust down. Cars and trucks unable to go on, their ignitions, shorted out by the static electricity, opened up and let out more passengers who stumbled for shelter. One family came in, clutched together, their pa divining the path with a long wooden rod. If it hadn't been for the company, the storm would have broken us completely, broken us more thoroughly than the plow had broken the Oklahoma sod, more thoroughly than my burns had broken the ease of my hands. But for the sake of the crowd and the hospitality of the home that sheltered us, we held on and waited, sitting or standing, breathing through wet cloths as the fog of dust filled the room and settled slowly over us. When it let up a bit, some went on to bury Grandma Lucas, but my father and I, we cleaned the thick layer of grime off the truck, pulled out of the procession, and headed on home, creeping slowly along the dust-mounded road. When we got back, we found the barn half covered in dunes. I couldn't tell which rise of dust was Ma and Franklin's grave. The front door hung open, blown in by the wind. Dust lay 2 feet deep in ripply waves across the parlor floor. Dust blanketed the cook stove, the icebox, the kitchen chairs, everything deep in dust, and the piano buried in dust. While I started to shovel, my father went out to the barn. He came back, and when I asked, he said the animals weren't good. and the tractor was dusted out. And I said, "It's a wonder the truck got us home." I should have held my tongue. When he tried starting the truck again, it wouldn't turn over. April 1935. Okay. I want you to pause the video, add to your chart, and then play the video again so we can keep going with the lesson. All right. So here's what we're going to do next. I want you on a separate sheet of paper. It could be on the back of your chart. Do you have room? It could be on a blank sheet of paper, a piece of notebook paper, whatever you have around to write on. I want you to do the following. So I want you to reread the notes that you just took on your character analysis chart and write down 1 or 2 sentences summarizing Billie Jo's relationship with Mad Dog. 1 or 2 sentences summarizing Billie Jo's relationship with Mad Dog. How is their relationship going? How do they act towards one another? How does Mad Dog feel about Billie Jo? How does Billie Jo feel about Mad Dog? Right? 1 or 2 sentences. Now do the same for Billie Jo's relationship with Daddy. Has anything changed in their relationship? They still not talking? What is it that that maybe has changed? How are they acting towards each other? So pause the video and you can take time to summarize before we move on. Okay, next. Let's discuss. This is a stanza coming from the last poem we read, Blankets of Dust. We're going to talk about why do we think the author chose to use the words and phrases in bold. Flocked, only to find the air still clear and gentle, grateful for each easy breath. What effect do they have on the reader? Let's read it all together and let's talk through those things. It says, on the second clear day, we believed the worst was over at last. We flocked outside, paraded in town, going to stores and coming out, only to find the air still clear and gentle, grateful for each easy breath. All right. So what other words could the author have used in place of the ones in bold? Think to yourself. So instead of flocked, could she have used gathered? We gathered outside? Why did she use flocked instead? What does that do for the reader? Well, it makes me think of a bunch of birds, right? Flocking, I think of a bunch of birds coming together. Like, it reminds me of a flock of birds. So I think about maybe people are just as excited, maybe as energetic as a flock of birds would be to go outside. Gathered wouldn't have had that same effect for us. Think to yourself now, have you ever described air as being gentle? Why do you think the author did? Has it been a while maybe since the author, in this case Billie Jo, experienced clean air, clear air without dust? Right? The air is gentle. It's described as gentle. We usually describe people that way. It's in a way personifying, right? It's personification, giving the air human characteristics, human qualities. Now think to yourself, have you ever felt grateful for being able to breathe? What is the effect of the word grateful here? It says grateful for easy breath. Sometimes we forget to be grateful for things as simple as breathing. And in this case, she mentions she's grateful for each easy breath. Each breath. So the people are probably very grateful for the simple act of breathing clear and clean air. The dust is gone and people are happy and relieved. Last question that I want you to think to yourself that will get us to answer these two is, why does the author slip in the word only and still? Only to find the air still clear. What do those words help emphasize? Well, the word still indicates that they are surprised to find that the dust is gone, that it hasn't come back, that it wasn't just a 1 day thing, that it wasn't just a 2 day thing, but it goes on to 3 days of clear air, and they just feel like so surprised that the dust has not come back. Why do you think the author chose the words and phrases in bold? What effect do they have on the reader? I feel like you're able to answer this now on your own. Okay, last thing we're going to end with is we're going to copy 3 to 4 lines from the poem, Blankets of Dust. You're going to underline words and phrases that you find interesting in some way. You're going to explain why the author chose the underlined words and phrases. Why did the author choose to use those words and not other words, right? The ones that you chose and you underlined. What effect do the words and phrases have on you, the reader? So don't go on underlining any word or phrase. Underline those that are you find interesting in some way. Only those words and phrases you find interesting. What effect did those words and phrases have on you, the reader? That'll be your exit ticket, and you might be asking yourself, how am I going to copy lines from the poem when I don't have my book? Well, I will show you. Okay, here is the poem, Blankets of Black. You can choose any 3 to 4 lines from this poem that really speak to you, that are interesting, sound interesting to you when you read them, and then you can answer, what does it do for you as a reader? What does it accomplish? Don't go underlining just any 3 to 4 lines. Make sure that they actually include good words, good phrases that are interesting and the author may have chosen purposefully to accomplish something. There's the poem. What effect do the words and phrases have on you, the reader? Okay, that's your assignment. You have the rest of the week to work on this. So good luck, and I really, really am excited to stay in touch with you and hear from you about these assignments through talking points. Okay? Talk soon. Bye.